All right, up next, it's James Cleland. He's talking about artificial intelligence in the pulpit. Let me tell you a little bit about James. James is obsessed with the intersection of the gospel, technology, culture, and fun. He is the host of the God Geeks podcast and the St. Mark Drive Time podcast. He is a former radio personality and frequent guest of KFUO and a pastor here at St. Mark, Houston. If you love Lego, Star Wars, food, James will gladly be your friend. And here's our friend right now.
All right. Well, it's that post-afternoon snack time where everyone's tempted to fall asleep and take a nap. So why don't you stand up for me and play a game? Let's play a game so we can connect, have some fun, and get into this talk. The game is called Real or Artificial. Real or artificial. If you think it's real, you're going to put your hands on your head. If you think it's artificial, just put your hands on your head. And if you are correct, stay standing. If you're wrong, sit down. Okay? So if it's real, head, artificial, hips. All right, first one. Is this real or AI-generated artificial? Okay, if you think it's real, hands on your head. If you think it's artificial, hands on your hips. All right, lock in your votes. It is artificial. Sit down if you put real. This was in the news. This tricked me the first time I saw it. It made it on all the big news channels. Someone created an image of the Pope wearing a clerical puffy coat, and it became all the rage. All right, next one. Is this real or artificial? What we got, real or artificial? Okay, artificial. The prompt here, and I created this one, was a Lutheran pastor in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. I think I met this guy at the Synodical Convention. There were a lot of him. Next one, we got still people left. Real or artificial? You got to commit, one or the other. Head. All right, here we go. Artificial. A hipster pastor at a Lutheran church in Texas. Man. Here we go. Real or artificial? Actually, that looks a lot like the last one. Hands on your head if you think it's real. Artificial on your hips. That's real. That's a hipster Lutheran pastor in North Dallas, Bill Breimer. Some of y'all know him. Looked just like the last one. Kind of uncanny. I think Frank won, but let's see if Frank can go all the way. Let's see. Real or artificial, Frank? He's going artificial. He is correct. The prompt was a Lutheran school teacher in Texas, but I ask you this. Is it real? Because that is Mr. Schultz here at St. Mark. When that popped up, I didn't know what to do. Okay, Frank. Real or artificial? You're going with real. I'm going to say no, yes, real. Frank, you can sit down. You won. Everyone give Frank a round of applause. So I met this guy at the Synodical Convention at the conference. He was standing at the door to the conference, and every day as I walked by, I would wave to him, and he'd ignore me, and I was like, that guy's a jerk. And then one day, I needed to figure out where the local drugstore was, and I went up to him, I asked, and he just stared at me, and I stormed off kind of upset. Turns out, he is artificial. One of my favorite artists, and I've seen his work at museums, is Mark Sigin, and he makes hyper-realistic sculptures. And I thought this guy was real for like 3 days. And that's what we're going to talk about today is there's a difference between art and artificial, but I want you to realize that some of these artificial things, when you give them a purpose, it becomes artificial. So today we're talking about generative artificial intelligence. There's a lot of artificial intelligence out there. It's running all kinds of different things, but we're going to specifically talk about generative artificial intelligence. That's the artificial intelligence that creates things. You've seen some of the stuff creates text or images. You can use it to create a video now. You've seen some deep fake videos maybe. You can create sounds with it. I use a program called Descript where I've trained it on my voice, and when it reads one of my podcast recordings and I don't like what I've said, I can delete it and type in what I want it to say, and it does it in my voice. They're working on generative AI that can read and create smells. So imagine you're giving a sermon and you have an illustration on freshly cut grass, and all of a sudden everyone smells it in the room. That is coming. And then, of course, there is generative AI that can create the sense of touch through haptic feedback, through different peripherals. The possibilities are endless, but we are going to talk about two main things, and that's text generative AI and image generative AI. They're the two that are making it into the news the most. They're the two that I use when I teach and preach. And I use two programs, ChatGPT, Generative Pre-trained Transformer is what the GPT stands for, and Midjourney, which is a diffusion model image creation. We'll talk about what that means later. So these are the two things that I'm going to use in this talk, and I'll let you know when I've used them. I've been obsessed with artificial intelligence since 1986 or so, when my dad brought home a computer from his work, and it had the video game Zork on it. And Zork was a video game that was all text. So it would describe your character's situation, and then you would use what was known as a natural language prompt to tell your character what to do in that world. So if your character was stuck in a maze, you could tell them to go north, west, south. You could tell them to pick up an axe. You could tell them to swing it at a monster. And then it would generate text from a script and tell you what was going on with your character in that world. And your goal was to escape the maze. Now, behind the scenes, it was just a math equation. You put in certain things, it recognized those words because it had a number associated with it, and it churned things out through an equation. About 10 years later, I was the nerdiest kid in my high school. I saved all my birthday money up, and I bought the coolest calculator you could get, the TI-92. In 1995, it came out, and I had to have it because it had a QWERTY keyboard on it, and that meant you could program easier. And so I was a little bored in school, and during math class and history class and other classes, I would program games for my fellow students and then transfer them to their calculators so they could play them. And the game I created was like Zork. It was called Escape the School. And the whole point of it was you would get a description of what was going on, and then you had to solve puzzles, ways to sneak out of the classroom, basically, and get off the grounds of the school. But it was highly labor-intensive for me to create that because it depended upon what words the person put in, and they'd have to hit the right words at the right time to unlock the next level. So I created another program just for fun, and it was like Mad Libs. Anyone ever done a Mad Lib before? So this Mad Lib program, you would put in whatever sentence you wanted, but in brackets you would put certain parameter words like teacher or student or noun or verb or adjective. And by doing this, it would create a randomly generated sentence using your structure, but plugging in those words. And the way it worked is each word that I had in this huge list of words was assigned a number. So it tokenized the words. And then it would use a random number generator to pick which word to plug into the right variable, and then it would give you a sentence that was funny about a teacher or a student or whatever. I did not get in trouble for this because they didn't know I made it. The basic structure of the programs that I played in the 1980s and that I made in the 1990s are the same structure of artificial intelligence. There is a huge amount of data, there is a prompt from a human being, and there is an output. It generates something. It's that simple. It's math. And yet, we're kind of scared. I was just talking to some pastors earlier. They're like, what if pastors, their jobs are replaced by AI? There was this church in Germany that did an AI sermon. It wasn't good. We're a little worried. We're scared. What if these, malevolent programs start to infect our church, take our jobs, do scary things, and replace our people even? These are the images we're actually kind of worried about. But maybe what we're actually worried about is that we might just have some lazy pastors who use AI to write their sermons for them. Maybe that's the most dangerous thing. I don't know. Let's talk about it. Let's demystify a little bit what's going on in AI. There's data, there's a prompt from a human being, and there's an output. Whether it's a text-generated output or an image or a video, there's some type of human prompt in the middle. What scares us most of the time are those question marks. How is it getting these answers? What is going on behind the scenes? Can I trust it? In general, what's going on is there's a huge amount of data. So ChatGPT is known as a large language model. There's a lot of language that has been loaded into it. Billions upon billions of tokens and words and phrases. A lot. And then you put in a prompt, and it looks at that prompt and it tokenizes the words you put in there. And it takes those words and compares it to all the words it knows, and each word is plotted on a vector, a line, and lines intersect with meaning, if you will, because a word doesn't just have one meaning, it has lots of them. And sometimes they overlap with other words. So there's a network of words, a neural network of meaning. It puts value to certain words. It puts value and weight based on where it is in a sentence and sentence structure. It's learned a lot. But at first, it was pretty dumb. It had to be trained. So that's the P in ChatGPT. It's generative, pre-trained. People trained it, and now they're getting to the point where robots and AI are training each other. Now, have you ever done a CAPTCHA on a website? You trained an AI. You were part of that process. So the prompt gets assigned meaning, and then something like ChatGPT, it's called a transformer. That's the T in ChatGPT. It's going to take that prompt, those small amounts of words, and transform it into something bigger. It's basically a predictive model. It takes that game that Tanner played earlier with Matt, the finish this sentence game, that's all ChatGPT is doing. What's the next word in this sentence? Based on everything I know, what's the next word in this sentence? But then it throws in randomness to it to try to give it that kind of human veneer. So when you use ChatGPT and you put the same prompt in, you're going to get different things each time. Or if you use Midjourney and you put a prompt in for an image, they're going to be different each time. They're going to be similar but different because there's randomness involved. And that's that second question mark. There's randomness and prediction, which gets you to an output. Now, I spent hours upon hours upon hours learning about this. Taking in data and then trying to transform it into an output for you and simplify it as much as possible. What I learned along the way is those question marks are constantly changing, and they will keep changing. That's the whole point of artificial intelligence, is it learns and it changes and it gets redirection both from humans and from other programs, and it changes in its model. So the more you try to understand those question marks, the more you realize you're never going to fully understand them. There's actually image generation models that we don't exactly know how they work, partially because the people who create them keep it secret, but sometimes they don't understand how it's doing what it's doing. But at the heart of it all is math and randomness. Here's what won't change. The world, you, and your people. ChatGPT, Midjourney, they are reading the world. They've got all kinds of data from the world. And you are putting the prompt in, and then you are presenting something to your people. That is not going to change, and that's what we've been doing for centuries. This is just a new way of it happening. The you in the middle is pretty important as a preacher and a teacher. So here's something I learned about that. AI learns by doing, and it learns from feedback, and so do you. So I asked ChatGPT to write a joke about a pastor using ChatGPT to write his sermons. And after about 30 iterations, I finally got a good one. Kind of. Why did the lazy pastor hire ChatGPT to write his sermons? Thank you. Good. The human element matters. Because he wanted more time for his real calling, afternoon naps and golf. It's okay. Could use a little work. It tried. There were some really weird jokes it came up with. But here's the point. Matt hit on this earlier. Planning, presence, and passion are essential to your communication. Generative AI can assist you in planning. It can free you up for presence. And it can undermine and undergird your passion. It can help it grow and help you communicate. The problem is that there are times when you don't have enough time to plan, and then you fall back on things like AI to cut corners. Or you rely on it so much that the human element in your sermon is being removed. Your presence is being removed. Or you rely on it because you're not passionate anymore. And those are problems. So as we go through this, I'm going to show you some things I've done over the past few months. I've been obsessed with AI for 35 some odd years, but it's really starting to become a thing that can be used in your daily life, and it is so cool and so scary at the same time. So remember this as we go through. The first thing I learned about AI is that generative AI is fun. I am having a blast playing around with it. Can you figure out what the prompt was for these images? Jesus flipping over the tables in the temple. You are right. AI is hilarious sometimes. It doesn't mean to be funny, but because there's just this lack of a real human behind it, he's so happy. He looks like he's skateboarding in one of them, right? It's cool, Jesus. So I've been having fun with it. Sometimes it just gets my creative juices flowing. I start to think, well, what if I combine this and this? What if I use this style of illustration to show people something? I'm obsessed with Star Wars. And like every red-blooded American male, I also love the Battle of Hastings. No? Okay, well, I do. So I thought, what if Star Wars was illustrated in the style of an 11th century medieval tapestry? And now that's one of the desktop backgrounds on my computer. It's just fun for me. Some of you met Seth last night at Slowpokes. He's one of my buddies, and we talk Dungeons and Dragons all the time. And I was sitting there trying to work, and he was distracting me, talking about his D&D character, Barry Cobbler. And I thought, whoa, let's see if I can plug that in to AI. There's his D&D character, Barry Cobbler. It's a gnome cobbler who is he goes around with the guitar and hits people with the guitar. I forget what class that is. Oh, Bard. Thank you, nerd. So I also got thinking, I want to play some D&D with some of my friends, but I want to take them on a journey that maybe teaches them some things. So I started developing some monsters through AI that are based on the 7 deadly sins. So I'm going to take them on a campaign where they got to fight the monster of greed and sloth and lust. And on a campaign through that, it's going to be a ton of fun. I had fun also when Matt asked me to create a drink, a signature cocktail for VoxCon. And I spent a lot of time testing the drinks. It was a blast. And one of the things I did is I plugged in what VoxCon is into ChatGPT and asked it to develop a special drink for the occasion. And the first one it popped up was, what do y'all think? Do you think it was the Lutheran or the Houston Honeysuckle? If you think Lutheran, raise your hand. All right, Houston Honeysuckle. The Lutheran was real. Houston Honeysuckle was AI generated. Now, someone figured out that the Lutheran was real. They told me, I think the Lutheran's real. And I said, why? And they said, because you're most defensive of that one. Oh, yeah. I created it. It's mine. Don't you dare say it tastes bad. Now, the Houston Honeysuckle didn't quite hit the mark at first. My wife and I went through a few of them. And we're like, just too sweet. What's going on? And she decided that the best thing to fix it was some carbonated water. And she was totally right. See, AI can't taste. It can't experience. It doesn't really know how to enjoy its output. So it has to be refined. And this was a good example for me that the output from the AI got me part of the way there. But I tell you what, creating the Lutheran was a blast. I had fun doing all the research. I researched what are the proper ratios for a cocktail. I found out there's all kinds of religious cocktails out there based on like pastors and various things. And I found one called the Presbyterian. Any Presbyterians here? One. Okay, sorry about this joke. The Presbyterian was a very complicated drink, much like Presbyterian theology. So I simplified it into the Lutheran. Throwaway joke. So AI can be fun. It can also be functional. And one of the things I realized it can do is because it has read the world already, when it takes all that data, it's reading the world, it can help you read the world. So I gave a prompt to ChatGPT. I said, adapt Psalm 23 for a modern teenager. And it said this: through the hallways of high school I navigate, my backpack heavy with books and dreams. I trust in myself to find my way. Amidst the chaos of exams and friendships, I fear no teenage drama, for my friends stand by me, and in their laughter I find my calm. In the midst of this teenage journey, I'll discover who I am meant to be. My passions and talents will shine through, and I'll embrace every possibility. Surely growth and self-discovery shall follow me through these teenage years. And in the heart of youth's adventure, I find my path free from fears. Do you see the issue? ChatGPT has read the world and put it through the filter of Psalm 23, and this is what it comes up with. This is where our teenagers are putting their faith. I could do a survey, and I think it would confirm this. I could go talk to teenagers, and I think it would confirm this in general. This is how they view their journey. So the danger would be doing this and taking this version of Psalm 23 and handing it to my kids saying, this is a version for you, and not juxtaposing it with Psalm 23 and our shepherd. But it could be a useful tool. I thought maybe I could do a sermon. There's a book called American Gods. Anybody read that? Great book. And I thought, well, what if I put in what I think some of the American gods are into Midjourney, and it'll prompt out an image for me on some of the things I've worshipped over the years. I like guns. I like the Second Amendment. But there are times in my life where I think I made that an idol. What did he look like? Okay. That could be useful in a sermon. It cuts a little deep at times. I want to look like some of those guys, not one of them. But so then I put in another prompt. I'm right now, my idol is distraction and entertainment. What does that God look like? Who am I worshiping? When you look closer in these ones and zoom in, it's scary. Now, I want to point out something. There's a gentleman who showed up in both. And as I developed more and more of these on different idols that I have, and American ones in particular, he kept showing up. I don't want to make a statement about that, but AI is making a statement about that. Somewhere out there, we as Americans have started to worship politicians. And as AI reads our creations, it is filtering that into these outputs. It's something to think about. Which got me thinking about my particular context here at St. Mark. So I put in the prompt, a middle school student at a private Christian school in Houston, Texas, and it popped out this kid who could very easily go on one of our flyers. Or on the website. But I got a little curious, and I kept putting that prompt in. Do you notice something? Every single one is a young white person. And almost 95% of them, because I kept churning this out, were male. Something about what we're putting out into the world is causing AI to see this when I put in the prompt, Christian private school in Houston, Texas. I know for a fact at St. Mark, this is not our population. We at least have 50% girls. But that's telling right there. So I put in the prompt, I just changed it a little bit from private Christian school to public school in Houston. I don't have any data to back up any of this, but there's something out there where this is what AI, when it condenses down the information, churns out. Now, I also don't know why one boy has a gas mask on. Again, that randomness just gives you some weird things. I don't know. It gets you thinking, though. What about a Lutheran family from Houston, Texas? You want to write a Southern Gothic novel about a messed up family? Put this prompt in. It'll give you all the information you need for a creepy story. Look at the weird arms on the happy family. AI has some limitations. It does not do hands and arms well. So if you're ever trying to determine if something's AI, look at those things. But 9 times out of 10, when I put in the prompt for a Lutheran family in Houston, Texas, they weren't smiling. They were all white. Which got me interested. Well, what if I just put in a family from Houston, Texas? And I tell you what, this has been in my head as I've walked around Houston, and you know what? This is more what I'm seeing in Houston. It's not always what I see when I visit churches. But this is an AI-generated person and family that could be on my street. I don't know what to do with this, but it's coming from somewhere because it's reading our world. So that's a useful thing you can do, a functional thing you can do with AI. The other thing I love to use it for is inspiration and illustration. So I've been teaching a class on the Psalms, and I broke the rule I gave earlier, which is don't do this because you're running out of time. And I thought, I need some illustrations for Psalm 40. So I just started plugging in verses from Psalm 40. Psalm 40, verse 2. He drew me up from the pit of destruction out of the miry bog and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. AI has read Chad Bird. That is Christ in the muck and the mud with his people. I showed that image in my class, and we talked about that for quite some time. Psalm 40, verse 3. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. I personally have never really thought about the Psalms being sung like this. And it's also telling he looks kind of like a Jesus. Sometimes the AI really stumbles upon some beautiful truth because it's actually read all the religious texts that are out there. So when you give it some good prompts, it'll sometimes churn out some beautiful stuff. Psalm 40, verse 6, sacrifices and offerings are not what you want, but you've opened my ears, and now I understand. Burnt offerings and sin offerings are not what please you. Look at the imagery there from a robot. This guy has sacrificed everything, and all that's there is destruction. Psalm 40, verse 12, right now I can't see because I am surrounded by troubles. My sins and shortcomings have caught up to me, so I am swimming in darkness. Like the hairs on my head, there are too many to count, so my heart deserts me. What a beautiful illustration of really what sin is. It grows out of you. It surrounds you. It follows you. Darkness. We like to point the finger about sin. Oh, all the enemies surrounding me. But in Psalm 40, the imagery really is the stuff I've created. It's surrounded me like hairs on my head. So your time matters. That's the other big takeaway, is your time matters, and AI can free you up to do some important things. I use AI to create posters. Some of them are out in the hallway. You can go look at them, but I don't have the time to do all the graphical stuff I'd love to do, so I'll use AI for that. I created a coloring sheet based on a psalm that I printed off, and in my Bible study, kids and people can color it in. It was AI generated. I created a logo for our esports team here at St. Mark. I didn't have time to sit down and do that. I churned that out in 5 minutes. It frees me up to do some of the things I'd rather be doing, which is spending time with people and spending time in the Word. So yes, AI can help you with these things. There's even, and it launched this week, there's a website called Pulpit AI. And I got in on the beta, and what it does is you upload an MP3 of one of your sermons, and it churns out a synopsis that you can post, discussion questions for your people, a 7-day Bible study based on the sermon with Bible readings and questions to discuss, tweets that you can put out, you name it, it does it. However, you wouldn't just hand your people a random Bible study from Barnes & Noble on the religious aisle, would you? Please don't. This can be useful, but you're going to have to go through it and edit it. And you're going to have to understand that it's a little bit of a sacrifice, because something about coming up with your own discussion questions and going through your own sermon and trying to figure out what point was I trying to make, if you can't make a synopsis of your own sermon, there might be an issue. So that process can be useful. But this actually helped me. I put a sermon in, and it really thought the sermon was about a low-carb diet. Like that was a real important thing. I made one aside to that. But it pulled that out and made a big thing about it. And I got thinking, well, maybe some people, that's what they heard. They didn't really hear what I was trying to get at. So that was useful too. But really what I'm getting at is your time really matters. So this is Paul talking to Timothy. Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. This is the job that we've been entrusted with. This is our vocation. Can we do this using the tools of AI? Yes. But can those tools get in the way? Yes. I also love the fact that Paul wants us to correct, rebuke, and encourage each other. That is how AI learns. So do you. So it's right there in Scripture. Your time really matters, for the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. I have been as transparent as possible about how I used AI to prepare for this talk. I'll put the prompts that I use for every image, I want you to know when I use AI. And part of the reason is I want you to be trained to recognize it, to see it, to ask certain questions, to not take certain things at face value that you see on the internet. There are people out there that will use AI to give people the things their itching ears want to hear, and people will turn aside to myths. That is a fear of mine. And I worry about it. So I'm going to always be transparent when I use AI, and I'm going to use it a lot. But partially to train people on what it might look like when they see it out in the world. But you keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist. Discharge all the duties of your ministry. There are certain things that are kind of ancillary to your ministry. Use AI. There are certain things at the heart of your job as a pastor and a teacher, and that's spending time in the Word, wrestling with it, digging deep. Don't let AI do the things that you should be doing as an evangelist. If it helps you do those things, awesome. Don't let it do it for you at the expense of you growing as a disciple. We live in a world that is more and more artificial. I'm not actually afraid of robots taking over the earth. I'm not afraid of it at all. That is an unfounded fear for us believers. This is not what we have to worry about, robots taking over and replacing our people. But we do live in an increasingly artificial world where people are distracted, glued to devices, ignoring each other, and craving real presence. And we get to give it to them. Real presence is more important than ever. Both your presence in the things you create, like Matt talked about, your presence in the lives of people, like the other Matt talked about, and the real presence of Christ in the lives of our people through word and sacrament. Two of my favorite artists are Edward Hopper and Simon Stålenhag. Edward Hopper is famous for Nighthawks. You can see it in Chicago. It's one of my favorite paintings. The use of light in it, the use of color, the use of blank space, it's all uniquely Edward Hopper. And it has a unique message that he crafted into it. That message makes it art. Simon Stålenhag has another very unique view of the world, a very unique style. It's somewhere between nostalgia and science fiction and robots and Goonies and all those things all in his art. It's really cool. So I put the two together. You can see the color and the blank space and the weird robots. And you know what came from each artist because of their styles. There's a unique vision and work from these artists that AI is pulling from. Sesame Street in the style of Simon Stålenhag. I put that as a background on my computer and it rotates through every so often. It scares me every time. But I can't look away. But it has no message. It's in the style of Simon. It has no message. You can go further. Moses and Jesus in the style of Wes Anderson. Kind of fun. I might use that in some sermon illustrations, do all my illustrations in the style of Wes Anderson. That would be cool. Are you picking up on something? AI relies on human stories, styles, art, vision, but it is not an artist. It mimics. It will never do more than that. And you don't want to be like that. Your story, your style, your art, your vision are essential to communicating the story of the gospel. The Christian church has had a unique relationship with technology over 2,000 years. We're usually the first to adopt something, whether it's papyrus or folios or books or the printing press, Roman roads. In 1924, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod founded the oldest religious radio station in the world, KFUO radio. It's been around 100 years as of next year. At the time, it was scary to people. Has radio been used for evil over the years? Yeah. But it's been used for enormous good in spreading the gospel. Same thing with television, podcasts, streaming services, the internet. Why would AI be any different? It's going to be more than okay because God has and will continue to work in, through, and despite technology and you for the sake of the gospel. I want you to remember a specific invention. It was invented to instill fear in a population, to control them, the cross was a technology. And how did God use that evil technology for the ultimate good? Can he not do the same with artificial intelligence? He will, just like he does with you. Thank you.